you. And so I have some friends from Virginia, and we're going to get some tickets for today. But I would like to do for you something I developed years ago. I call it 4 flags that George Washington served under, or how we got our American flag. So I have right here 4 flags, and I'd like 2 volunteers. We end up lining them up across here. 2 volunteers simply to hold this flag. When George Washington was 23 years old, all right, who's my first 2 volunteers? Hold this right here.
Right.
George Washington was 23 years old. He was the colonel of the Virginia militia. When he was 23, I'm going to be fighting the lawnmower today. When he was 23 years old, he was the head of the Virginia militia, and the French and Indian War had just begun, and he went with General Braddock, British redcoat regular general, and 1,200 men. He had about 200 of the Virginia militia, headed towards Fort Duquesne, which today we know as Pittsburgh, and this is the flag they marched under. This is called the British Red Ensign. In the jack, this is the union of 2 crosses for St. George of England and St. Andrew of Scotland. And so this is called the Union Jack. And this is the whole flag in the whole island. Anywhere in the world King George III and the British Empire ruled, solid red was to show that empire. So this is the flag. Young George Washington, a British subject, marched under on the way to Pittsburgh. They didn't make it. In fact, it was a terrible, terrible ambush. General Braddock is killed. All soldiers on horseback except 1 were killed or wounded, and that 1 was George Washington. When he got back to Bedford, Pennsylvania, he found out that his family thought he was dead because they'd heard a message that the commanding officer had been killed. Well, he was commander of the militia. Young man, is 23, as I said. Anybody here 23? Anybody here remember? Yeah. Anybody remember being 23? Okay. Well, when he found out his family thought he was dead, he wrote letters to his mother and one of his brothers. And here's an excerpt from that letter. As I have heard since my arrival at this place, a circumstantial account of my death and dying speech, I take this early opportunity of contradicting the first and of assuring you I have not as yet composed the latter. Fancy way of saying, I'm not dead. Second sentence here, but by the all-powerful dispensations of Providence, I've been protected beyond all human probability or expectations. For I had 4 bullets through my coat, and 2 horses shot under me, yet escaped unhurt, although death was leveling my companions on every side of me. Remember they shot these musket balls that were round, they flew kind of like a wiffle ball. And the French and Indians quickly realized that young man on horseback knows how to fight in the woods. Take aim at him. Well, whatever you aim at when you throw a wiffle ball, that's almost assuredly the thing you will not hit. So he was the only officer. Well, 21 years later, I need 2 more volunteers. And this is all you have to do is stand there for a moment. You can take that corner. Okay, thank you. Oh, we got some back there. Just hold that corner. In fact, we're going to hold it down just so people can see it. 21 years later, in 1775, Continental Congress, over a year before the Declaration of Independence, formed the Continental Army. And they needed a general, and they hired 44-year-old, now General George Washington. And we had not declared independence. We are not a separate country. We're fighting for the rights that we have come from the Magna Carta, which was written by the bishops of England, hence the crosses and the Union Jack, that kind of a thing. But we're now fighting for our rights. So they took the solid red of the king's empire, who they would describe as a tyrant king, and they put 6 white stripes to break up the empire of the king. The white stripes of liberty, as they were later called. And that's why to this day we have red and white stripes in our flag. The next year, 1776, Declaration of Independence is signed, and George Washington's army in Manhattan, he gets word of it within just a few days, and he issues orders to his troops. And in those orders he says this: the blessings and protection of heaven are at all times necessary, but especially so in times of public distress and danger. The Honorable Continental Congress, impelled by the dictates of duty, policy, and necessity, having been pleased to declare the United Colonies free and independent states, several brigades are to be drawn up, and the Declaration of Congress is to be read in an audible voice. That was 45 years of old George Washington. The next year, in 1777, before America's even first birthday on June 14th, 2 more volunteers. Continental Congress makes the first official flag of the United States of America. And all they've done this time is swap out the Union Jack for 13 stars. The in fact, Continental Congress. By the way, I'll let you know this flyer I'm having here. I got like 50 of them here. I'll walk along and give a free one to everybody who'd like one, unless you're trying to write it down as I'm talking. But in the Continental Congress, before America's first birthday, said, resolved on June 14th, flag dated this day, resolved. The flag of the 13 United States will be 13 stripes, alternate red and white, that the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue backfield, representing a new constellation. So the concept was, is as if God has put a new constellation in the heavens. That's in Europe. They were actually kind of watching and wondering how this is going to work. Well, this was the flag, the first official flag, 1777. And so the war is eventually won, Constitutional Convention takes place, and the first president of the United States under the Constitution. That's a great trivia question. Who was the first president of the United States? It wasn't George Washington. He's the first president of the United States under the Constitution, and that's what we honor. So it's just a little trivia that history people like to point out sometimes. But this was the flag with George Washington, 10 years after 1777. And let me get the exact year right. I love getting these things exactly right. 1789, he gave the first inaugural address of the first president of the United States. And here's the first key paragraph. I say key paragraph. The first paragraph is acknowledging who's present and that kind of a thing. And when he starts his speech, he says this: "It would be strangely improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that Almighty Being who rules over the universe. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than the people of the United States. Every step by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. The preservation of the sacred fire of liberty is entrusted to the hands of the American people." While he's president, let's see, he was 57 years old. Anybody want to raise their hand and say you're 57? All right, last flags. The last two volunteers. Who's going to help me? All right, step on over here. All you got to do is just like them. Last flag, maybe get them turned around right. So lean on that side, hold the garment. Maybe hold the bottom down so people can kind of see it. While George Washington was president, Kentucky and Vermont became states. So they thought, oh, we should add 2 stars. Oh, we should add 2 stripes. So this later, the design that I think 18 years later flew over Fort McHenry and now has the nickname the Star-Spangled Banner. 15 stars, 15 stripes, because when George Washington was president, again, Kentucky and Vermont became states. Actually, then Tennessee became the 16th state, and they thought, oh my gosh, if we keep adding stripes to the bottom of the flag and we're going to have more states, this ain't going to work. So they hit a big old pause button for about 25 years until they resolved that situation, which I'll explain in a moment. But when George Washington retired from the presidency, age 64, he wrote a long document and he sent copies of it to all 16 governors at the time of Tennessee, and it's called George Washington's Farewell Address. Annually in Congress, they read it into the record. It's an edition. And here's a key paragraph, a few sentences from George Washington's Farewell Address, age 64. "Of all dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equal with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Felicity means happiness." Now here at the Washington Monument, you look like a lot of the monuments, well, there's nothing on the outside, but actually at the very top, there's a 10-inch tall pyramid or pyramidal that's made of aluminum, and which is a non-electric. It's a good thing if you're going to get struck by lightning, it have aluminum on top. And on 3 sides, south, north, and west, it has words of the committee, the year, that kind of thing. But on the east side, the side that faces sunrise in the morning, it just has 2 Latin words, Laus Deo, which means praise be to God. And that caps the Washington Monument. And there is actually a key Bible verse that George Washington used repeatedly, especially with Jewish people. And he wrote a letter to the Jewish congregation, and I want to end with this, with his quote from that letter. He said, "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while," then quoting the Bible, "everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall none be make him afraid." And he continues, "May the Father of all mercy scatter light and not darkness upon our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here and in his own due time and way everlastingly happy." So that's George Washington as president writing to the Jewish congregation in Rhode Island. So these are the 4 flags that I refer to as the 4 of the flags George Washington served under, and it shows you the development and evolution of the flag. flag of the United States. I guess I was going to mention, in 1818, after the War of 1812, they thought, okay, we keep getting these more states. Why don't we go back to always 13 red and white stripes to honor the original 13 states, and then the number of stars will equal the number of states. And in my lifetime, they added Alaska and Hawaii, but for the rest of you that are younger than me, it's been the same 50-star flag ever since then. So I'd like to thank my volunteers.
Yay! Thanks,
I'll give
Bernie.
them a little consideration now, which means a free flyer, and I'll come along and give it to you. Fold it down in half and half and half.